Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. In this week's video we explore the remains of a stronghold caught up in the border wars and set in a strategic position. Settled above the banks of the River Tweed are the ruins of a commanding, important and striking Norman fortress. The walls echo the stories of the bloody battles, the invasions, and are scarred with over 9 centuries of history. Come join us to explore Norham Castle. The story here begins in 1121 when Norham Castle was commissioned by Bishop Ranulf Flambard of Durham. He was an extremely influential character and a government minister of King William Rufus of England. His nickname Flambard meant torchbearer, and this may have referred back to his personality. He started his career under King William I of England, and it was more than likely that he was involved in the Domesday Book of 1086, as well as being the keeper of the King's Seal. It was Ranulf that saw the opportunity and recognised the need to protect and guard the vital border crossing between England and Scotland, and conceived the idea of Norham Castle. From a viewpoint across you can see into Scotland and its borders. You can only imagine being a gatekeeper or a guardian and seeing around to the many armies that would gather on the horizon, ready for battle on the borders. The region could be wild and lawless, and sometimes erupted into open conflict. In wartime, Norham's English garrison defended the Tweed fords, which was an easy crossing point into England. Together with nearby castle of Berwick, Norham was an essential part of the defences of the eastern border. The castle was an appealing target and was besieged 8 times. Firstly in 1136 when David I of Scotland invaded Northumberland and captured the castle. It was soon handed back to the bishop, but was again captured 2 years later during another invasion. But by this time the structure of the castle was greatly damaged. It remained derelict for a while until Hugh de Puiset, the Bishop of Durham from 1153 to 1195, had rebuilt the castle and built the heart of the castle, which was the mighty keep. He instructed the castle to be monumental and strong, and on first glance that would be your first thoughts in how intimidating the thick walls actually are. Over the next 20 years the castle was well maintained, and in 1217 it even withstood a 40-day siege by the Scottish King Alexander II. Edward I, or the Hammer of the Scots, visited the site on several occasions, and in 1296 left behind his queen, Marguerite of France, there during his invasion of Scotland. Border warfare during the early 14th century was almost constant, but Norham was not always involved, perhaps because it was such a task to be able to break down and destroy. The most noteworthy event in Norham's history took place in May of 1291, when Bishop Anthony Beck entertained Edward and his advisors at the castle, whilst the king adjudicated between 13 competitors for the Scottish throne. This was known in history as the Great Cause. Judgment was made in the favour of John Balliol in 1292 at Berwick Castle, and 3 years later Balliol paid homage to Edward in the Great Hall here at Norham. Their accord was short-lived though, and Edward I subsequently claimed the throne of Scotland himself. Then this launched a prolonged period of border warfare. The castle's true tests and defences came in the late 13th century, during the First War of Scottish Independence. In 1297 the Scots, who were led by Braveheart, or William Wallace as we know him, unsuccessfully besieged Norham. And then again in 1319, Robert the Bruce tried his hands to seize it, but this castle remained powerful enough to deter him and his armies. The keep became a refuge amidst all of the chaos brewing outside the walls, but it would only take a short amount of time before the cracks would eventually show, and this powerful fortress would be slowly destroyed, considering the amount of battles it was part of. Later in 1497, King James IV of Scotland attacked Norham as part of his support for Perkin Warbeck's rather suspect claim to the English throne. The Scots bombarded the castle with artillery, including the famous Mons Meg, the huge siege gun that is now on display at Edinburgh Castle. The castle held out for 2 weeks before an English army arrived to force the Scots into retreat. Following from this siege, the castle was since repaired, but again in 1513 it came under attack from forces of James IV, this time as part of his Flodden campaign. He returned with heavy artillery, ready for a fight, with as many as 20 large calibre guns, although this time without the famous Mons Meg. It took the Scottish army over a week to break down the castle's defences, destroying and plundering the castle walls till they crumbled, for it then to be overrun and taken by the Scots. Soon after, the castle had no choice but to surrender, but by then much had been destroyed and left as we see today. Weeks later, James was defeated and killed at the famous Battle of Flodden, near Branxton in Northumberland, and his reign of 25 years on the throne had gone, and Norham soon fell to English control again. The castle had been so badly damaged by the Scottish bombardment that it required a massive rebuilding effort. The medieval fortress was transformed into a fortress strong enough to withstand a new threat of artillery. Military engineers created covered gunnery platforms and strengthened the base of the castle walls with earth to absorb cannon shot. The castle was then seized by the English crown in 1559 when the Bishop of Durham refused to take the oath of supremacy, acknowledging the monarch as the head of the church. The castle was garrisoned for most of the 16th century, but in 1596 Elizabeth I refused to spend any more money on the decaying structure. After the union of the English and Scottish crowns in 1603, the castle was deemed unnecessary and was allowed to decay. As you explore the site, you can see the outer walled structures, which were made up of constructed gun towers, which incorporated arched gun positions. From these positions, enemy heavy guns could be attacked, and the whole of the area outside the castle could be swept with gunfire and archery to try and prevent the enemy from getting close. The gun towers were very clever, and they enabled 3 levels of archers, handgunners and gunners, all manning large guns that could fire all at once at an approaching force. The state of the castle today isn't much different as it has been for several centuries. It still features some elements of what were once amazing defences. The castle was built on the south of the River Tweed and is protected by a steep slope on that side. A ravine protected the east side, and the south and west sides were protected by an artificial moat. Further features of the castle were of an inner and outer ward. Accessing the inner ward could only be done via a drawbridge and a fortified gate, referred to as Marmion's Gate, which we entered as we first arrived at the site. The most impressive and prominent feature of visiting here at the castle is the keep, which still partially stands today and possibly dates back to the 12th century. The enormous structure had dimensions of 84 by 60 feet and stood to 88 feet tall. But the most impressive part of this is the thickness of the walls of this medieval keep, at over 28 feet thick. It was originally 3 stories high, but later in 1422 the keep was rebuilt and 2 more stories were added to the building, giving it its grandeur. Inside this great tower would have been where the bishop and his guests would have been accommodated. At the western end of the Great Hall, a pantry, a kitchen and service rooms could be found. There are still remains of an oven there too. Once leaving the wooden bridge, you can notice the two ruins of the two buildings that are sunken around the area. The higher of these two is the brewhouse with a malt kiln at the southern end, and the one below is a step-down well, which fed spring water through an aqueduct and running through the moat. There really is an abundance of discovery here at Norham, and the history and the feeling that you get whilst visiting here is so atmospheric. It's one castle in Northumberland that we think you would be mad to miss. The site is free to roam and open most of the year, and there is ample parking at either of the entrances, giving you a quick and easy access in and out. But our recommendation really is just to spend a few hours here exploring and wandering these scarred ruins. Have a sit down up on the banks and imagine the people wandering in and out of this important fortress. So if you've enjoyed watching, please give us a big thumbs up, click the notification bell so you'll never miss an episode, and consider joining us over on our Patreon or joining the pinned family here using the join button. We want to say a massive thank you to those watching and to all of our channel members and Patreons for all of their support. So we'll see you in the next one. Till next time.